So my name's Josh Reid and I'm from TabTouch, and my presentation is called Figma Has Feelings. So we're going to be talking about, if you came for some heavy hitting leadership sort of stuff, Candel's is finished, so you might want to bail now. This is going to be a little bit more lighthearted. So Figma Has Feelings. What are we talking about here? Two things, Figma and feelings. Now you probably don't need an introduction on what Figma is, but for the people who aren't UX designers, Figma is obviously the platform where you do your concepts and your prototypes and whatnot. I'm sure a lot of you use Figma, some of you might use Sketch, and some even might use Adobe XD, rest in peace. So, second one is feelings. Who here has feelings? A couple of you, that's good, good to know, yep. Me, not so much, so that's why this is interesting for me. So, when it comes to user feedback, which is sort of what we're going to be talking about, I do enjoy some bad feedback. So that's how I know that maybe I've got a higher tolerance to some other people. And that's sort of what this is about. Different people's sensitivity to feedback, how we deliver it, how we give feedback, how we receive feedback, and things like that. I wanted to talk about, obviously, feedback. That term is used a lot when we think of Agile, the feedback loop, user feedback, customer feedback, the feedback from internal feedback, external feedback, and things like that. Making iterations. So obviously when we make changes to our designs, there'll be multiple versions and you're going over and over, and it might feel like you're going in circles a bit, and there's always new rounds of feedback. So that's what the feedback loop is referring to. More and more, and I just wanted to include a little bit of that Agile language. We hear it all the time, fail fast. So fail fast, learn and move on, which is a great methodology. But who thinks of the designer? Think about that language, how aggressive that is. We failed, let's move on. It's such... So the designer's there doing their best work, they put it out there. I've nailed this. We're going to go well with this one. What does everyone think? We failed, but it was really fast. Oh, thanks. So maybe working on how we... Maybe there's some learnings there, failing fast. Internal feedback. So this is the easy stuff. The people you're working with, okay? Coming up to you, giving it to you directly, saying it to your face. They know you a little bit better. So how does that work when we get that sort of feedback? Well, sometimes it's not, I guess, as direct as it could be or as helpful as it could be. So maximum detail, what do I mean by that? A good example would be in my workplace, a common one, maybe everyone's received this as well. Let's call him Tony. Tony comes and he gives you a bit of feedback and he says, I think we've got some big problems here. We've got some problems with the design. You say, tell me more, Tony. What can we do here? And Tony says, the purple. I don't think we can do it. I think we've got to drop the purple. And you think to yourself, Tony, what happened to you? So for us, purple, that's a real life example. Tony isn't his first name, but purple's a brand colour, so my hands are tied. But you know, maybe Tony grew up getting abused by Dockers fans, something like that. It could be any number of things. But is it valuable feedback? Not so much. Is the customer worried about that colour? That's where we can get that validation. So it's almost selective hearing or interpreting the feedback that you do get in a way that's going to benefit that end product and that end user's experience. Constructive, yeah, what can we do about it? Tony, can we change the brand colour? I feel like we're locked in here. You know, you've got a system that's built up, you've got the brand guidelines, you've got that reputation. Are we going to be changing colours? Because Tony's not a fan of the Dockers, probably not. So there's other things to think about like that. Never personal. So this is one that I'll touch on a little bit in detail further. But I guess as designers, or it doesn't even have to be designers, anyone who's creating something and then trying to obtain validation or feedback on that, it can some people do take it personally. Personally, I don't do that, but I do see it a lot where people don't separate themselves from their work and it can feel not very nice to get that sort of feedback. So whether it's intended personally or not, people are so engrossed in their work, they can't separate the two and they are that product. Any negative feedback, people can really take it to heart. So I guess, yeah, so this is more tips on giving feedback. So I guess people can be a little bit more direct, a little bit more detail. and a little bit more solution oriented. So if you're going to come with some negative feedback, what would happen if we change that? Maybe a little hypothesis. Would it be better if we changed it? Oh, that's a good idea. What can we do to change it before you go for that next iteration and before you go to the customers? So that's a bit of internal feedback there. And then we've got the user feedback. User feedback is really interesting. This is a one that I've done lots and lots about, and I'm very aware of how different the user feedback can be compared to internal. Obviously, internal, you work with these people all the time. Even if it's not all the time, it's part of an organisation, it's their job to give feedback. Everyone's sort of performing the same role. User feedback, new people, new ideas, these are people that you don't know, you haven't met before, they're giving you feedback for the first time. It's a whole different ballgame. I'm a bit of an expert on user feedback. I think one of the very first pieces of user feedback I got earlier on in my career, I think I was only maybe 14 years of age, and I was in Melbourne with my Eagles hat, and I remember a car drove past and they yelled out, "Nice hat, dickhead." And I thought, it's user feedback, but is it valuable? Not so much, not so much. It could have been more constructive, so that's my qualifications for receiving feedback. People problems. Okay, so one thing I have noticed, you get people in, they're your user testers, you're testing your product. Maybe it's not yours, maybe it's a colleague who's produced this. You're there, you're moderating. It's a one-on-one, face-to-face, and you want them to use your prototype and give you some feedback. Now, the problem with a lot of people is they're nice. They're polite, they've got manners. Doesn't really help us. So usually the initial question would be something like, what's your first impression of the product? And 100% of the time it's always, oh, good, yeah, no, it's nice, yeah, good. Because they're there to help you and they don't want to offend anyone, so they just say, oh yeah, it's good. Oh, what rating would you give it out of 10? Oh, 10. Oh, would you change anything? Oh, a few things. Okay, so then they go on to list 5 things they don't like, but they still want to give a 10. So this is the frustration. So working with people, and it can be a little bit of your problem. So what kind of questions are you asking? Coaching them through so you know that the feedback you're getting is valuable stuff and actionable. So it's all about how you communicate and how you request the feedback, and almost building that relationship to what you're going to get back. So get that money, that's probably a little spicy, but it's more about, these people are paid to give an opinion. They know you hired them, your company hired them to give you feedback on the product, and that's another reason why they're overly nice. If you think of a social situation, you've got an invitation to go somewhere, someone's cooked you a meal, which is the prototype. Oh, what do you think? Oh, delicious, thank you. And then when they leave the room, they're like, that sucked, but I got my $20, you know what I mean? You know, they're still getting paid either way. So it's when it's face-to-face that makes it a little bit harder. You almost need to break down those walls and say, I won't be offended, 100% honestly, how do you feel about this? Any feedback at all is good feedback. So really breaking down those barriers, and that can be some tests better than others. Bad answer, bad question, that's what I was referring to when I was how you phrase those questions and what detail you go to. So a lot of the things, I think, as an example in interaction design, you'll have someone select a component. So let's say a drop-down menu, for example, nice and easy. They select it and there'll be some options in there. So the test might be, do you have the right options in there? So they press it and they look at the options and they're like, oh yeah, that seems good. But did they expect those options to be in that list? So before they've even selected it, a good question would be, what do you expect to see? And if they tell you before they've opened it, the options that you've got inside there, that would be a better measure of success than them opening it, convincing themselves that that seems logical, and then telling you that that was a good test. So that's a little bit what I mean about the answer or the question. Feedback versus you. So this seems a little bit aggressive, and that's sometimes how people can interpret it. You know, you've put out your baby, you've looked at it a lot. So when you think about that design process, it's visual, it's interactive, it's a journey, it leads to other areas. It's a very complex beast, and you've looked at it more than anybody from a designer's point of view. And when you put that out into the world, that's a scary place. And even whether it's internal feedback, external, any of those places where you are I guess, putting your work out there, it's a scary place and it can feel like it's a personal attack. So what I'm big on and what I talk to a lot of my team when I'm working with them about is to try and not take that personally. And it's easier said than done. And I think it sort of builds resilience over time to try and see through the feedback and see how it can be action, because feedback is just learning. So let's think about when you're receiving the feedback. Sometimes it's nice to try and imagine a situation where the work isn't yours. So if you're putting work out there to be validated or to gain some user feedback, whether people like it, whether they don't, what do they like, what don't they like, it's easy to imagine if it wasn't your work, it would just be so much easier. You'd be very more analytical about it. These are the good things, these are the bad things, this is what we can change, these are the numbers, on whole, this was the cumulative feedback. So that's one thing we can do. More feedback, more better, not more grammar. So I think that more feedback is just about what we spoke about, the detail, and the more you can get. So even if it's bad feedback, if there's multiple pieces that you can join together, maybe a bit of a mind map, maybe linking together common threads, that can also help. So even if you think you're having a bad test when you're doing some user testing, make sure you do load up and you get all the questions out there, you make full use of the time, don't wrap up early, because looking back on it, there's always a situation where you think you could have asked more or you could have got more out of that person or user or customer. Tell me more, feedback is on the prototype. So yeah, that's it. It's just, there's a piece of work, the prototype, the user interface, whatever it is separate to you, and they're commenting on that, and it has nothing to do with your skills or how good you thought it was. When we think about these sorts of things, it's interesting to think about our job as a designer is to put ourselves in the customer's shoes, but no matter how good we are at doing that, we're still not a customer. The only pure customer is that customer that you get. So even though you might be a multi-user or something like that, you're obviously clouded by the work you're doing. So having that pure customer feedback, if that's different to yours, trying to twist that into a learning and taking something from that rather than taking it as I was wrong, you can take it as I can build on that. So really focusing on the learnings from those outcomes. This is the majority of what I was going to talk about today. So getting feedback, receiving feedback, not taking things personally. When we think of Figma having feelings, behind the Figma is a person. So that's the main thing I was really trying to get at. So I thought what would be really helpful now is to go through some real feedback in real life, or in Bluey, I think they say for real life. So this is some real feedback. I've tried to redact a lot of the info there, but you could probably see it if you really wanted to have a look. So this is at Tab Touch. One of the, I guess, avenues people can provide feedback is through the app. How we get delivered it is just through an email. It's called a service request. It gets allocated to different departments depending on what they're talking about. This one's specifically user experience related, so this comes through to our team, and this is very much directed at me. So I thought I would give this one zoom right in on the comment. So the comment just says, check this out. I would just like to say congratulations, why thank you, to who is responsible for the design of the app, that's me, for the changes to the race, well, you should say to the changes to the races page, and say thanks. I mean, this is good user feedback. We don't often talk about that, all right? So we've spoken about all that negative user feedback. Let's say Greg is his name, which it isn't. That's the kind of feedback we like to see. So this is sort of, we talk about glass half full, glass half empty. This is the half full sort of stuff here. So he's made a point of providing feedback on the app. I mean, that's no easy task. You to go and submit that. He's gone to the trouble, obviously loving my work. Why wouldn't he? And he's saying, who's responsible for this? Congratulations. I mean, this never happens. This was absolutely supreme. So I don't want to focus too much on myself, but what a job I bloody did on this one. And then he finishes off with saying, thanks. This felt personal. This is one step away from jotting it down in a Valentine's card. This guy is absolutely loving it. So this sort of stuff, I was actually going to pop this straight on the fridge. And this is sort of why we do it, for this sort of feedback. And it doesn't get any better than this. And I didn't edit this. That is exactly what he said. If you're thinking that this is photoshopped, it's 100% real. The only thing I covered up was the last bit where he went on to say, thanks for completely fucking up the app. The new page is way worse in every way and you have ruined the Tab Touch app. So it went from 0 to 100 real quick. But I tell you what, when I read the start, I thought, here we go, congratulations. Doesn't start any better than this. And then he went on to say that, if I can interpret that feedback, some changes are required, I believe, but hard to know. But it gets better. So this is a standard form that people submit, and there's actually some more detail at the bottom where, oh yeah, so we read this and obviously he's having a bad day, but there's a customer form, and he went into the details of filling out his customer details. He's a brave man. He didn't even want to be anonymous. He's like, I'm no keyboard warrior. These are my details. And there's a section that says requires callback. So if someone's having some problems, you can call them back or whatever like that. And of course, I'm going to call Greg up. So I got his number there and I called him up and I said, I'm Josh from Tab Touch and I'm the one responsible for the design of the app. Did you have any feedback? And if we think back to what I said previously about most people, maybe not Greg, have manners. When he's on the phone, Greg has manners. Oh, Josh, no, I didn't. It's pretty good. I don't actually mind. I don't mind it. Like if I'm gonna, when I do use, what did I? Look, it's good. Like Josh, I like a lot of it. Like he was rambling. He was trying to be kind. He was backpedaling, and I couldn't let him go. I said, because I'm reading the feedback here, Greg. I've got it up on my monitor here, and it's saying the part about completely fucking up the app. Like, is that? Oh no! I didn't mean fucking it up. I mean, it's sort of some parts are good, and I think maybe there's room. Like you could do a little bit of you do some things. And I said, oh, that's great, Greg. And then we got to the bottom of it, and he didn't like the side scroller. We had to drop down. It's changed to a side scroller. So that's all Greg's problem was. So, completely ruined the app. I'm not sure about that. It was one UI element. And as far as our feedback went, Greg was in the minor percentage here, but yeah, didn't make it up onto the fridge, that one. But, even negative feedback can be good because this is all about asking more questions. Luckily, Greg, he didn't leave me on red. He answered the call and he gave me some more details and then we made some improvements. So I guess it's only one piece of feedback, but it can be good if you only read the start and it can be bad if you read all of it. But, not all feedback's like that. There's always good feedback as well. And the majority of the feedback that you do get is good if you're doing a good job. So you just got to focus on the positives. And I think that, don't take things to heart. And does Figma have feelings? No, people have feelings. Thank you.